Well, really good to be able to share with you today, online, on demand, if you're watching it later, and of course those of you in the room as well. Let me introduce myself a little bit more than you've already heard. So as you've heard, my name is Ian. Although my accent doesn't sound like I'm from Manchester, so I live in Manchester with my family, my gorgeous wife, my two beautiful daughters. I realise that's a little bit of a cliche. I've yet to hear a speaker get up and say, you know, I live with my average wife, my annoying children. But, you know, there you go. That's my family. And yes, as you've heard, I'm the founder of Naked Truth, which is an international project that is seeking to open eyes and free lives from the damaging impact of pornography. And I'll be honest, I didn't sit down with my careers advisor when I was 14 at school and say, yeah, I'm going to start a porn project. It wasn't particularly my plan. My kind of journey has been mainly actually involved in this sort of stuff that you guys are doing, thinking about mission and church planting. I've kind of been involved in all that kind of stuff for most of my adult life, and it's really only been in the last 8 years or so that I've been focusing in on this particular topic. And as we go, I'll explain a little bit more about why. But before we do, if you're online, I really hope you're going to be able to get involved with this session, perhaps a little bit more interactively than you've been able to thus far, because we're going to use some software during the session called Menti. Maybe you've come across it before. So you will need your phones, whether you're here in the room or whether you're watching online. And hopefully on the screen, you'll get some instructions as well. So yeah, that's great. What you want to do is you want to go to menti.com. And then you'll see there's a code that you need to put in when it asks you for a code. So you go to menti.com, and then you want to put in this code 22822757. And when you get there, you'll see there's a little thumbs up or a little thumbs down. I'd love you, if you've heard of Naked Truth, if you know a little bit about us, maybe you've seen something or heard something before, maybe give a thumbs up. If we're unknown to you as an organisation, then you can give a thumbs down, and that just will let me know that you've logged on as well, which is really helpful. And of course, as I say, if you're watching online, you can do this too. You can open another tab and do it, or just have your phone and do it as well, and hopefully we can bring us together. Those of us that are watching online and those of us that are in this room here in Wimbledon. That's great. Thank you. Just going to give you a moment or two longer just to do that as I'm kind of looking at the numbers in the bottom of the screen there. That's fantastic. So, we've heard that our topic for this next 20 minutes is the topic of pornography. And I don't know how that makes you feel, whether already you're feeling a little bit awkward, you're maybe kind of like, oh, is there a way I can sneak out of the room without anyone noticing? Maybe you're wondering why. You know, why is this topic being talked about at a conference like this? Maybe that's what you're thinking about. And so just to kind of open up that I want us just to watch a video. Don't worry, not that kind of video. This is some basically just people on the street, the kind of people that we want to reach, the kind of people we're hoping are going to meet Jesus, and what they have to say about this subject. So let's watch this clip together first.
The first time I watched porn, I think I was 13.
I think when I was about 12.
Maybe 13, 14.
15.
I was about 11.
Probably about 12.
Yeah.
12, yeah.
I was probably about 10, maybe.
I know I have loads of friends that watch porn for pleasure.
Of course, I liked it. Something new. It's really easy.
It's really easy to find porn now. Just type into Google whatever you like.
I think I was shocked at first because I had never seen anything explicit before.
We'd never seen sex.
All my friends watch it and talk about it, and that's been since I was 11.
I think everyone I've dated has watched porn.
Like, we're in a generation now where it is normal, porn is normal, and everyone watches it.
I'd say I'd watch porn probably at least once a day at least.
There was a stage where I was 3 times a day, really, 3-4 times a day.
3 to 4 times a week, I'd say. At least once a week, I guess, or something like that.
That's news to me.
I was addicted to it when I first got into it. Like, I come home from school, put porn on. From there, more porn. It was just escalated.
Okay, so one of the things that has massively changed the landscape when it comes to pornography is online. You know, I grew up, so I'm about 49, just shy of 49. So I grew up with porn being magazines on top shelves and VHS videos and shopkeepers who would look at you and sort of say, there's no way you're 18. That was kind of what porn and access to porn looked like for me growing up as a teenager. As you heard there, mostly kind of younger people talking about the fact that pretty much that is completely different now. You know, in 2007, someone wearing a black turtleneck jumper stood on a stage in California, held this bit of plastic and metal in his hand and said, today, Apple will reinvent the phone. And that was the launch of the iPhone. And now this generation is the first generation with any time, anywhere access to unregulated content. And so that has had a huge impact, and positively and negatively, on us as a culture. And one of the impacts that has had is pornography. The number of people I speak to who are of my generation, who are in their 40s, who say, you know, I didn't really struggle with porn through my 20s and 30s. It's actually been in my 40s. It's been in the last 10 or so years that this has become a struggle for me. And they kind of trace that back to the fact that, oh yeah, I got an iPhone. It was like before, I just didn't have access. Now it's so much easier that it's now become an issue. And so, as you've already begun to do, which is great, I'd love you to try and answer this question. How many visits do you think one website had in 2019? Okay, so you can vote using Menti. How many visits do you think one website had? Online, here in the room, what do you think? So just to give you a little bit of context for this as well, I think the Euro finals last year, I think had something like 50 million people watching live, just to give you a bit of an idea of what those numbers feel like, okay? So pretty much everyone I knew was watching that football game, but 50 million people were watching it whilst it was on. So when we talk about 75 million visits a day, that's a lot, okay, across the world, but it is a lot. Well, the answer is, in fact, 115 million a day. It equates to 42 billion visits in a year. So 42 billion visits breaks down to 115 million a day, and that's just one website. That's just one website. So what we're talking about is when you think of a porn user, you know, it's really important that we don't think of, you know, some man in a dirty Mac coming out of a sex shop in some sort of, you know, seedy part of our city. It's anyone who owns a product made by Mac or Samsung. You know, that's the shift that's happened. The shift from the sex shop to the smartphone has meant that our churches, our congregations, and our communities are accessing porn in a way that was never the case. Perhaps when you were training in church leadership, for example, you know, it just wasn't like this. It is a different world. It's a different landscape. Let me just give you a few other statistics whilst we're here. So in July last year, July 21, as top 100 visited websites, porn sites received more traffic than Twitter, Instagram, Netflix, Pinterest, and LinkedIn combined. In a recent Ofcom report, so last year, 49% of the UK population said they watched porn in September 2020. Nearly half of the UK population. It's really important we don't think this is just like a fringe issue. That's what I'm trying to help you understand here. This isn't just a few that some people struggle with sometimes. This has become, you know, so central to people's lives. We did a Comres survey as Naked Truth a couple of months ago. Of that survey, about 2,000 people, Comres basically ring people up and kind of give them a bunch of questions. So about 2,000 people were asked to take part in that survey. 38% said they watch at least once a week. So 2 in 5 said they're watching porn at least once a week. And 13% said they were addicted. They kind of used that word for themselves. So I want us as leaders to begin to ask ourselves, so what does that mean for us then? What does that mean when we think about our congregations, our flock, those people that we're seeking to serve, to love, to care for? What does that mean for our communities, those people that we're seeking to reach and bind up broken hearts and bring good news to? You know, what does that mean if this issue seems to be so core, so central to what's going on in their world? But perhaps we need to be honest enough to answer this question too before we start talking about other people. Let me emphasize, this is completely confidential. I have no way of knowing who has put what as an answer to this question. And it's one I ask often in all sorts of different contexts, whether it's our team in a high school, a secondary school, or whether it's an event like this. Where would you put yourself? Be honest. When did you last view pornography? Whether you're voting at home, here in the room, what's your honest response to that? Okay, thank you. Just give you another moment or two to submit your answer. So we can see here already, can't we, that we're not just talking about them, but that's our congregation or community, but we're also talking about us. What has God got to say to us who, you know, in the last month, we've got 7% in the last 7 days, 17% in the last month. You know, what has he to say to us about this issue as well? I'd love to just take a moment to also just broaden your thinking a little bit about who this actually impacts, and what those people look like and in what ways they are being impacted. Because we've highlighted it already that maybe it's more than we imagined who are actually using porn themselves. And of course, we've already acknowledged that's people who are attending the conference today, as well as those that we are seeking to serve. But actually, it's not even just the porn users who are impacted by this kind of new landscape of pornography. So we have our porn users. It's worth saying that 1 in 3 visitors to porn site are female. So it's just really important that we don't think about this just as a male issue. You know, and as the church has a bit of a history of that, I would say that, you know, it's like if we are going to talk about porn, we'll do it at the kind of the men's event, you know, at the curry night or whatever. And that's something we've just got to shift our thinking around a little bit. But it's, as I say, it's not just the users who are being impacted by porn. It's also partners and spouses, those in relationship with porn users. 56% of divorces cite obsessive porn use as a key reason in the breakdown of their relationship. That came from a survey of divorce lawyers a few years ago. 56%. We probably think, you know, having seen those vox pops that we saw earlier, people saying, I first saw porn when I was 11, 10, 13. They were the kind of ages being mentioned, weren't they? Statistically, it is around 10 or 11 that people are first exposed to porn. And again, worth us understanding that isn't just kind of like, you know, the page 3 of The Sun kind of exposure. It's if you type porn into a search engine, even just out of curiosity as a child or as a teenager, what you get is hardcore aggressive, abusive material often in those first search results. In fact, one MP put it like this: what is illegal to sell in a sex shop because of the laws around kind of retail is served up for free every day on a computer. And so for parents, there's all sorts of concerns, aren't there, around, how do I know what my young people are looking at? How do I make sure that they're kept safe? And what impact is that having on the way they view themselves, their own body image, their own mental health, but also how they conduct themselves in relationships? All these are issues that our parents are thinking about. Of course, as pastors, we're impacted by this. As we've already seen from the poll earlier, we live as leaders often quite isolated lives. Porn becomes something that's not necessarily about sex, but just about self-soothing. It becomes a way of coping, a way of just getting by and dealing with stuff. It's a quick fix to some of the stuff that we're just carrying. So many pastors, the reason they're accessing porn isn't because of a sexual addiction as such, but just because they've found something that works. What about performers? How often do we think about that? The church as a justice movement. I have a friend who is a church leader now, but used to be a porn star, whatever that means. He talks about the impact that had on him, on his life. And he was very successful in that work. But he talks about the fact that when he won what was the Oscars of the kind of porn industry, he was at home just kind of having a mental breakdown. He wasn't even at the ceremony. He says out of the people he worked with regularly, and there was about a group of about 20 people that he kind of knew during his time in that industry, that there's only 2 who are still alive. 18 have committed suicide or overdosed. So these are some of the issues and some of the people who are impacted by porn. I wonder where you see or have seen porn's impact yourself in your pastoral context, if you have, whether people have ever spoken to you about this, whether this is something that people have, come and chatted to you about or whatever. Maybe just open up Menti and let me know. Where have you seen the impact of pornography? When I say physical health, that would be kind of addiction and things like that is what I'm thinking about. Although now GPs talk about something called porn-induced erectile dysfunction in men in their 20s. These young men who've been looking at porn for the last 10 years, since they were 15 or whatever, are now going to see doctors because their body is not functioning properly. And doctors are saying this is because of porn. That's not a moral thing that's being talked about or an ethical thing that's being talked about. It's a physical thing that's being talked about. That's interesting. Thank you for voting on that. I know as someone who's led church myself, one of our big dilemmas sometimes as leaders is volunteers, right? It's getting people to get involved. It's people stepping up and being involved in mission or whatever it is we're doing. One of the things we often hear and the people that we work with who are struggling with porn use, if they're Christians, is that many of them talk about the fact that they don't feel qualified to be involved in church because of the stuff that they're battling with. And so as leaders, we're kind of pulling our hair out going, where are the people? Why aren't they stepping up? Why aren't they getting involved? And for some, not all, but there's a large percentage, I would say, who are like, they just think, well, I can't because this is going on and I'll feel like a hypocrite if I did. And so it does impact in so many different ways, I think, people. So I want to ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to I'm just going to highlight a few places you can go to get some help and resources, and then we're going to do the round table discussions, I mainly wanted to introduce the issue to you today. I then want to just signpost some things where you can continue to learn. But let me just ask you some questions first, almost to get the discussion started, because I realize the round table thing might be more awkward today. So we're going to spend a little bit less time on the round table, and we'll do it this way. So when did you last mention porn in a sermon, if you ask somebody? Or when did you last hear it mentioned, maybe, if you're not the person who delivers the sermons in your church or whatever? This is very interesting. We've so far got from never till last Friday. You kind of don't get much more recent than last Friday. That's great. Again, just give you a moment to submit. Not 2019, 2014, 2022. So a real mixture here, which is encouraging to see some of those more recent ones. Let me ask you a second question. Do you and your team know where to signpost these different people? So if it's a yes, then you vote for it, okay? So if you're like, yes, I would know where to signpost somebody who was a porn user, or I would know where to signpost a parent or a partner, or if it's none of those, then, as some of you are already putting, then obviously vote for that one, okay? Because I appreciate you might feel like, well, I would know what to do for a user, but not a partner. That's a valid thing. Interestingly, again, statistically, this is a slightly older stat, but and it's from the States. So, again, it's a slightly different context there. But 93% of pastors who were surveyed in this particular report said that they knew that porn was a bigger problem than ever before in their churches. But only 7% of those pastors had any kind of program or strategy in place to support people. I think that's actually optimistic compared to the UK. I think 7% is probably much more than it would be here in the UK in terms of church leaders feeling equipped, feeling resourced, feeling like they know what to do. Because chances are you didn't get told that in your training. And so it's whether you've been able to find out. And normally it's whether that comes at a time of crisis, right? So someone comes to see you, and that's when you're suddenly, oh, right, okay, what do we do? How do we help somebody here? Let me just make a quick suggestion. I remember when I started Naked Truth, I was working for a great organization, and I told them what I was going to be doing, and one of the kind of leaders there, who was also a church leader, or had been a church leader, he said, why are you doing this? And he kind of said, no one has ever come and talked to me about porn as a church leader. I don't think this is a thing. Now, it was 8 years ago. He'd probably say something different now anyway. But I also kind of said to him, I wonder whether it's just they haven't come to talk to you as the church leader. I reckon probably the vanguard of people who hear about these problems are probably your small group leaders, for example. They probably hear about this first, rather than you. So that's why it's really important, or your youth leaders, for example. It's not even just about, do you know how to help people, support people, even signpost people to help? Does your team know? That's a really crucial question, isn't it? I'm going to skip that one just because I'm looking at the time. So let me signpost a few things for you then, as before we kind of break into those roundtable discussions, and maybe just share one or two very, very quick stories. Plenty of stories for you. I'd really encourage you, this isn't just a kind of promote the organization thing, but actually in terms of our social media platforms, so Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and those things, if you look for us, so Naked Truth Project or Naked Truth Team, we normally pop up with either of those searches. What you'll get if you start to follow us is stories, actually, of people who have found support, who've found freedom, who've found help, but also it will help you begin to understand this issue a little bit more broadly as well. And so I would really encourage you to maybe just find us online in that way, because that would be a great way for you to start to kind of find out a little bit more. But I do want to just kind of highlight a couple of websites to you as well. So we, as Naked Truth, our kind of main work splits into these two areas of open eyes and free lives. And so open eyes for us is education and kind of awareness and also equipping of churches. And so we do work in schools. We've got about a team of about 40 people around the world, some of which would be schools workers, and they would do stuff in schools, but also do stuff with parents, parent workshops, that sort of thing. And so that's the kind of open eyes work. But then we also have this whole area which is free lives, which is recovery programs. And that is for partners of porn use as well as porn users themselves. We run groups for male and female. We run groups that are kind of, completely free to access. They happen on this thing you've probably not heard of called Zoom. Yeah, that's how they work, so people can be anywhere. In fact, we were using Zoom kind of 8 years ago when we started, and we did literally have to take about 10 minutes trying to explain to people what Zoom was. We don't have to do that anymore, which is helpful. But it's amazing because it means someone can join a group in their car at lunchtime on their phone, and no one necessarily needs to even know that they're in a support group, which is so important. In fact, the same technology that has created anonymity and accessibility to porn is the same technology that's creating anonymity and accessibility to porn support. We're loving that. We also have other courses and things that if the idea of joining a group feels a little bit too scary, where someone can just work through some videos and some things like that if the idea of sort of seeing people seems a little bit too challenging as well. We have seen literally so many people, hundreds of people who maybe for decades, porn has been crushing them in different ways, whether that's as a betrayed partner who thought their marriage was completely ruined, and rather than fighting each other, they're now working together to fight against this addiction, through to people who have had decades of porn captivity, if you like, and are now finding hope and freedom and healing, and are finding Jesus. All our programs are accessible to people of faith and no faith or any faith. But what we're seeing happening, which is just so beautiful, is that people start to realize that actually, as I said before, porn isn't necessarily about their sex life or that side of things, that it is often filling a hole for them, or it is a coping mechanism, or it is a self-soothing thing. And so actually, as they start to find strategies to kind of deal with porn and when they're vulnerable to porn and when they're being triggered, and they start to put some of those things in place, actually what they start to realize is, oh, hang on a minute, there's something deeper going on here. That needs answering as well. And because normally we have Christians in groups and things like that, just natural, organic conversations about faith begin to happen. And we're seeing more and more people who are discovering Jesus for the first time because they came to get help with porn, but actually what they find out is that we can help them, but Jesus can heal them. And so that's been beautiful. In fact, one quick story. Couple who now work with us, they're counselors and they're on our team full time and deliver a lot of our kind of couple sessions and one-to-one counseling sessions. They joined us probably about 6 years ago as clients. They joined a group. They didn't know Jesus, knew nothing about faith, but they were looking for help when it comes to porn. As they got to know us as an organization a little bit more, they started to follow us and some of the things we're doing. And one of the things we do is a conference that equips and trains church leaders called the P-Word Conference, which I'll mention to you in a moment. But we were doing some live events. So we were doing this live event for church leaders. And they'd seen it on Facebook or something, and they said, can we come along to that? Now, when there's like an event that you want a non Christian to come to maybe first find out about Jesus, you're probably thinking Alpha. You're probably not thinking porn conference for church leaders. But they came along, and actually just in that whole day, as they experienced and heard vulnerability, but also stories of healing and all that God was doing, they both made a commitment in that, they started their faith journey on that day at a porn conference. It was brilliant when they got baptized and they had to tell people when they became a Christian. So, this is happening, and it's just worth me saying that maybe you'd think about this to say, for example, with perhaps Christians Against Poverty, where you think, okay, here's an organization that enables the church to address a specific need, but in the process of that, there's also then the opportunity for faith to be shared, for community to be experienced, for mission to happen. I would argue this is a similar thing. If as the church we're actually willing to talk about this, if we're willing to say, yeah, we know what it is to be scared as parents. We know what it is that for our marriages to be completely shattered. We know what it is to feel completely trapped by this compulsion or addiction. Why? Because we've gone through it too. But also we've got some answers and some help and some support. And ultimately we believe some good news in Jesus. There is a huge opportunity, I think, for us as church to be the ones who, rather than kind of being judgmental, which is perhaps where we're probably positioned right now when it comes to things like this, but actually being a place of hope and healing and safety and vulnerability. I think that's beautiful. You'll see that there's this last thing that I'm going to mention, and then we're going to jump into these questions. As I said before, we specifically do an event called the P-Word Conference that is aimed at church leaders. We did one quite recently, and I'd love you to take a look at pwordconference.com to be able to access just loads of incredible content. Experts, world-class experts from around the world, just delivering training for churches and church leaders. How to walk with those who struggle, how to help partners who've been betrayed, how to talk to young people, how to help parents, all of it's there. And so I'd really love you to take a look at that. But that's not just an event, it's actually something that we're going to be starting to provide in a more kind of ongoing way as well. And so in May, we're starting a church membership just to continue to train and equip churches. But if you want to find out more about that when that's launched in May, then I'd really encourage you to kind of jump on that pwordconference.com website, and you'll be able to kind of sign up to find out more about that as and when it happens.